The Birth of Stoicism, a tale of Zeno's transformation. In the grand city of Cyprus, around 300 BC, a man named Zeno lived a life of immense wealth and prosperity. He was a merchant of great renown, trading luxurious goods across the seas, from Phoenicia to distant lands. His riches afforded him comfort, influence, and a future that seemed unshakable. But fate had its own plans. One fateful voyage, as he journeyed across the sea with a ship full of precious cargo, disaster struck. A tempest unlike any he had ever faced tore through the sky. The winds howled, the waves roared, and in a matter of moments, his ship was swallowed by the merciless sea. Everything he had worked for, years of toil, fortune, and stability, was gone. In an instant, Zeno was ruined, a man at the crossroads. As he stood on the shores, watching the last remnants of his past sink beneath the waves, the weight of reality crashed upon him. What was he to do? Most men in his position would be consumed by anger, despair, or bitterness. They would curse the gods, drown in regret, or surrender to fate. But Zeno did none of these things. Instead, he chose acceptance, not because he was indifferent to loss, but because he understood a deeper truth. What had happened was beyond his control, but how he responded to it was entirely his own choice. Rather than mourning his misfortune, Zeno sought wisdom. He wandered through Athens, where he encountered the teachings of Socrates and other great philosophers. Their words ignited something within him, a realization that changed the course of his life and eventually the lives of countless others. He began to see that true power lies not in wealth, but in the mind. The birth of Stoicism. From the ruins of his former life, Zeno laid the foundation for a new way of thinking, Stoicism. At its core, Stoicism teaches that while we cannot control the world around us, we can control how we react to it. Fortune is fleeting, and external circumstances are unpredictable, but our mindset and virtues are always within our grasp. Instead of lamenting what was lost, Zeno embraced what remained, his resilience, his reason, and his ability to shape his own destiny through discipline and wisdom. This philosophy resonated deeply with many, and soon, Stoicism spread beyond the confines of intellectual circles. It became a way of life practiced by slaves and emperors alike. From Epictetus, the former slave who became one of its greatest teachers, to Seneca, the influential statesman, and Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor of Rome. A legacy that endures, even in the modern world, where uncertainty looms over every corner of life. Stoicism offers a timeless guide. It reminds us that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, that expecting life to be fair is as foolish as expecting the sea to be still forever. Instead of resisting misfortune, embrace it as an opportunity to grow. Stoics practice voluntary discomfort to build resilience, sleeping on the floor, eating simple food, taking cold showers. These exercises train the mind to find peace even in hardship, proving that happiness does not depend on luxury, but on perspective. Today, when society pressures us to chase status, wealth, and perfection, Stoicism teaches us the opposite, that true fulfillment comes from self-mastery, wisdom, and inner peace. The final lesson. If Zeno had spent his days mourning his lost fortune, he would have remained just another merchant ruined by fate. Instead, he chose to rise. He transformed tragedy into triumph, proving that the greatest wealth is a mind that remains unshaken, no matter what storms may come. And so, the philosophy of Stoicism was born, not from privilege, but from loss. Not in a palace, but on the wreckage of a sunken ship. And from that one moment of acceptance, a legacy was forged, one that has endured for over 2,000 years. The Stoics' Journey, a story of wisdom and resilience. In the bustling city of Aurelia, where ambition ran as deep as the rivers that carved through its heart, a man named Cassius lived by a simple principle: control what you can, accept what you cannot. Cassius had always been a seeker of knowledge, consuming philosophy, history, and science in his pursuit of wisdom. Books, mentors, and even the whispers of the city's elders had shaped his mind, but he often found himself questioning, was all this knowledge truly necessary? Was he unknowingly setting himself up for unrealistic expectations, only to be left disappointed when life did not align with the ideals he had absorbed? One evening, under the dim glow of a lantern in his study, he pondered this deeply. What if true wisdom was not about knowing everything, but about knowing what truly mattered? He realized that many people, including himself, often sought external validation, wealth, status, admiration, only to be left empty when those things failed them. His friend Lucius, a wealthy merchant, had once told him, "Cassius, I will be happy once I have the biggest estate in Aurelia." Years passed, and Lucius built his grand estate, only to find himself yearning for more. He sought admiration, approval, and validation from others, and when they did not respond as he wished, he fell into despair. Cassius knew there had to be a better way, the test of resilience. One day, Cassius set out on a journey to visit his mentor, Seneca, an old philosopher who lived in the mountains beyond Aurelia. The journey was treacherous, the roads winding, and the weather unpredictable. Along the way, a storm descended upon him. His horse slipped on the wet path. His belongings were swept away by the raging winds, and he found himself alone, stranded in the wilderness. Cold and weary, Cassius sat beneath a tree, his body aching from the fall. This was beyond my control, he thought. But then he asked himself, what do I control? He could have cursed his misfortune, raged against the heavens, or lamented the loss of his possessions. Instead, he chose to focus on the present. He gathered what little he had, sought shelter in a nearby cave, and rested until morning. When he finally reached Seneca's home, the old philosopher greeted him warmly. "You look weary, my friend," Seneca said. "Tell me, what troubles your mind?" Cassius recounted his journey, his struggles, and the realization that had struck him in the storm. I had no control over the storm, but I had control over my response. I could have given in to despair, but I chose not to. It made me wonder, how often do we suffer because we cling to things beyond our control? Seneca smiled. That, Cassius, is the essence of the dichotomy of control, one of the most important teachings of Stoicism. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we react. People spend their lives chasing external things, wealth, admiration, status, only to find themselves miserable when those things fail them. But a true Stoic places their happiness not in what they have, but in who they are, the burden of external validation. Cassius thought of the people of Aurelia, his friend Lucius, the artists who measure their worth by the applause of the crowd, the merchants who judge their success by the weight of their coin purses. Even he, at times, had placed too much importance on how others perceived him. But how do we free ourselves from this? Cassius asked. Seneca gestured to a nearby tree. Do you see that tree? It does not seek validation for its existence. It does not compare itself to other trees or wish to be anything but what it is. It simply grows, reaching toward the sky, not for admiration, but because that is its nature. Cassius nodded, understanding. I must focus on what is within me, not what is outside of me. The virtues of a Stoic. Over the next few days, Cassius stayed with Seneca, learning the four main virtues of Stoicism. 1. Wisdom, the ability to differentiate between what is within our control and what is not. 2. Courage, the strength to persist in adversity and resist destructive desires. 3. Temperance, the discipline to live with moderation and not be controlled by excess. 4. Justice, the principle of living with integrity and treating others with fairness. As Seneca spoke of these virtues, Cassius thought of the world beyond the mountains. He thought of rulers who craved power, only to lose it. He thought of the wealthy who were never satisfied, the artists who abandoned their craft because they weren't praised enough. He also thought of Nelson, the prisoner who had spent decades in confinement, yet emerged with wisdom rather than bitterness. Nelson had every reason to seek revenge, to be consumed by anger. Instead, he chose justice and forgiveness, understanding that the past was beyond his control, but the future was his to shape. A new path. With this newfound wisdom, Cassius returned to Aurelia. He did not seek admiration, wealth, or external success. Instead, he focused on his craft, his character, and his own internal peace. He still set goals, but he did not tie his happiness to their achievement. He still worked hard, but he did not measure his worth by external rewards. And when misfortune struck, as it inevitably did, he reminded himself, I cannot control what happens, but I can control how I respond. Years later, when a fire swept through Aurelia and destroyed much of what he had built, he did not mourn the loss of material things. Instead, he helped rebuild, guiding others to the same wisdom that had once saved him in the storm. And when people asked how he remained so calm in the face of disaster, he simply smiled and said, I control only myself. The rest is beyond me.